Baseball has had its heroes, but none loom larger than Babe Ruth. He wasn't just a ball player, he was a national icon, a symbol of hope when America needed it most. From the dusty diamonds of the early 1900s to the roaring stadiums of New York, Ruth's name became bigger than the game itself. He hit home runs that shattered records, but more importantly, he captured imaginations. His swing wasn't just powerful, it was poetry in motion, the kind of moment that made strangers hug in the stands. Even today, nearly a century later, his shadow stretches across every ballpark, every debate about greatness, every dream of a young kid gripping a bat. But who was the man behind the myth? What truths hide behind the legend of the Sultan of Swat? Tonight, we uncover the story of Babe Ruth, the legend bigger than baseball. Childhood of hardship, from orphanage to destiny. George Herman. Ruth Jr. was born in Baltimore in 1895 into a family weighed down by poverty and instability. His father ran a saloon, often consumed by alcohol and work, while his mother struggled with illness before passing away when George was still young. At just 7 years old, his parents placed him in St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys, a strict institution that served both as an orphanage and a reform school. For most children, St. Mary's was a place of confinement, but for Ruth, it became the foundation of his transformation. The daily grind of discipline, the rigid schedules, and the absence of family forced him to grow up quickly. Yet amidst the hardships, Ruth found two guiding forces: resilience and the game of baseball. Brother Matthias, a towering mentor who commanded respect, became the central figure in his life. He taught George how to play the game with focus and determination, showing him the power of discipline and channeling his restless energy into sport. Under Matthias's guidance, Ruth not only learned to hit and pitch, but also developed the toughness and larger-than-life presence that would one day captivate the world. A fork in the road: baseball or boxing. As Ruth matured, it became clear he possessed a rare athleticism that went beyond baseball. He had quick reflexes, powerful hands, and an aggressive spirit that made him a natural in the boxing ring. For a time, there was genuine debate about which path he might take. Boxing was a sport that promised fame and grit, one that could have swallowed a boy like Ruth whole. But Brother Matthias saw in him something far greater. Baseball, he believed, offered Ruth not just opportunity, but destiny. The lessons Ruth carried from boxing, hand-eye coordination, fearless confrontation, and a refusal to back down, would later make his swing and presence at the plate uniquely intimidating. Choosing baseball over boxing was not simply a decision of career, it was the moment when Ruth stepped toward becoming the face of America's pastime. The young boy from Baltimore, once seen as uncontrollable, now carried a sense of direction, standing at the threshold of greatness. The young pitcher who shocked baseball. When Ruth broke into Major League Baseball with the Boston Red Sox in 1914, it wasn't as a slugger, but as a pitcher. And he was no ordinary pitcher. Over 6 seasons with Boston, he posted a career-earned run average of 2.28, an elite mark by any era's standards. He won 94 games, including a dominant 24-win season in 1917. Most remarkably, Ruth set the record for consecutive scoreless innings in World Series play, a staggering 29,230 innings, which stood unbroken for more than 4 decades. His fastball, clocked at around 90 miles per hour, was nearly unhittable in the dead ball era when most pitchers topped out in the low 80s. Yet what made Ruth extraordinary was not just his ability on the mound, but his potential with the bat. By 1918, the Red Sox began shifting him into the outfield so his bat could stay in the lineup every day. What started as an experiment revealed something transformative. Ruth was not simply a talented pitcher, he was a once-in-a-generation slugger waiting to be unleashed. His transition mirrored the evolution of baseball itself, from a low-scoring, pitcher-dominated game to the power-driven spectacle fans still celebrate today. The first home run, a twist of fate against the Yankees. The story of Ruth's first Major League home run reads like destiny written in the dirt of a ballpark. On May 6, 1915, at the Polo Grounds in New York, Ruth connected for his very first home run. The irony was striking. It came against the New York Yankees, the team that would later define his career and cement his legend. Off-pitcher Jack Warhop, Ruth launched the ball an estimated 350 feet into the right field stands, a rare feat in an era when home runs were scarce. At the time, Ruth was still known primarily as a pitcher, playing in the outfield only occasionally. Few could have imagined that this swing, in the same park that would become the stage of his glory years, marked the beginning of a career that would rewrite the record books. That single shot was more than just his first. It was a foreshadowing of the thunder that was to come, an introduction to the man who would soon become the most feared hitter the game had ever seen. From that moment forward, it was clear that Ruth was destined not only to play the game, but to transform it. The Curse. Born on Broadway, Ruth's sale to the Yankees. In 1920, the Boston Red Sox made a decision that would echo through generations. Owner Harry Frazee, struggling financially and eager to finance his Broadway ambitions, sold Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees for $100,000 and a $300,000 loan. At the time, it was seen as a business transaction, but in hindsight, it was the moment Boston's glory gave way to decades of despair. Ruth left Fenway Park and arrived in New York, where his bat and personality fit perfectly with a city that thrived on spectacle. For Boston fans, the sale birthed what became known as the Curse of the Bambino. Their beloved Red Sox would endure 86 long years without a championship, while the Yankees transformed into the most decorated franchise in sports history. The trade was more than financial. It reshaped baseball's balance of power. New York gained not just a player, but a cultural force, while Boston was left to nurse heartbreak and bitterness. Ruth's own perspective was simpler. He embraced the city, the lights, and the chance to redefine the game. In the end, the deal that began as a desperate owner's gamble became one of the most infamous moves in the history of American sports. Appetite for excess, the man who couldn't be contained. Babe Ruth was as famous for his appetite as he was for his swing. Stories of his meals bordered on legend, devouring a dozen hot dogs before a game, 4 hamburgers, a pie, and washing it down with beer or soda, only to step onto the field and hit towering home runs. His indulgence was not confined to food. He lived life on a grand scale, embracing nightlife, women, and extravagance with the same intensity he brought to baseball. In 1925, his reckless eating habits caught up with him when he was hospitalized with what newspapers dubbed the bellyache heard around the world, costing him nearly half the season. Yet even in excess, Ruth's legend grew. Fans admired his flaws as much as his strengths, because they made him human, a larger-than-life figure who lived without restraint. In an era marked by restraint and prohibition, Ruth's unfiltered appetite for pleasure set him apart. He wasn't perfect, but he embodied freedom, energy, and the thrill of breaking limits. His ability to perform despite such a lifestyle remains one of the greatest paradoxes in sports history, reminding us that greatness often walks hand in hand with chaos. 60, but never 61. The number 60 became synonymous with Ruth's name. In 1927, as part of the legendary Yankees lineup known as Murderers Row, he hit 60 home runs in a single season, a feat that seemed almost supernatural at the time. To understand the scale of his dominance, Ruth's home runs represented nearly 14% of all homers in the American League that year. In today's terms, It would be like one player hitting hundreds of homers in a season. Yet despite all his records, Ruth never hit 61. That number would be broken decades later by Roger Maris in 1961, during a season extended to 162 games. Ruth had accomplished his 60 in just 154 games, giving his achievement an enduring weight. Fans debated the fairness of Maris's record, often pointing back to Ruth as the true home run king. More than numbers, though, Ruth's 60 captured the imagination of the public. Each home run was more than a statistic. It was a moment of theater, a spark of joy in stadiums across America. The power of those swings turned him into the face of baseball's golden age, ensuring that even when records fell, his aura would remain. Out-earning the president, the first sports superstar. In 1930, Babe Ruth signed a contract worth $80,000, making him the highest-paid player in the game. At a time when the average American worker earned less than $1,500 per year, Ruth's salary was staggering. When reporters noted he was making more than President Herbert Hoover, Ruth famously quipped, "I had a better year than he did." That line captured his wit, but it also highlighted a deeper truth. Ruth was among the first athletes to transcend the boundaries of sport. He wasn't just a baseball player, he was an entertainer, a national celebrity, and a commercial powerhouse. He lent his name to candy bars, endorsements, and barnstorming tours, becoming a symbol of the American dream in the process. In the midst of the Great Depression, while the nation struggled, Ruth represented escape, joy, and resilience. His success illustrated how sports could create cultural icons whose influence extended beyond the field. In many ways, he paved the way for modern athletes who earn more from their brand than from their game. Ruth's larger-than-life persona made him America's first true sports superstar. Called shot, fact, myth, or theater. The 1932 World Series gave birth to one of baseball's most enduring legends, the so-called called shot. In Game 3 against the Chicago Cubs, Ruth stepped to the plate as the crowd hurled insults and players jeered from the dugout. Accounts differ, but many claim that Ruth pointed towards center field, signaling where his next hit would land. On the very next pitch, he launched a home run exactly in that direction. A towering blast that silenced the hecklers and electrified the stadium. Whether he truly called his shot remains debated to this day. Some eyewitnesses swore he pointed to the stands, while others insisted he was merely gesturing at the pitcher or indicating the count. Ruth himself gave conflicting versions over the years, but the truth hardly mattered. The story became part of his mythology, the kind of larger-than-life moment that defined him. Even skeptics admitted the tale captured the essence of Ruth. Fearless, theatrical, and unforgettable. It didn't matter if it happened exactly as told. What mattered was that it could have, and that possibility alone was enough to make it immortal. The final curtain. 3 home runs at age 40. By 1935, Babe Ruth's body was failing him. He signed with the Boston Braves, hoping for one last chance to contribute and perhaps manage a team. Most days, he could barely move across the outfield, but on May 25th, in Pittsburgh's Forbes Field, he produced one final masterpiece. In front of a stunned crowd, the 40-year-old slugger hit 3 home runs in a single game. The third traveled an estimated 600 feet, clearing the stadium entirely, the first ball ever to do so. It was his 714th and final career home run, a fitting conclusion to a career that had redefined the sport. Just days later, he retired, knowing his body could no longer endure the grind. The sight of him rounding the bases that day, weary yet triumphant, remains one of baseball's most poetic farewells. Like a curtain closing on a legendary play, It left fans with awe and gratitude, a memory of greatness refusing to fade quietly into the night. The man beyond the diamond, flaws, scandals, humanity. To understand Ruth fully, one must look beyond the numbers. He was adored, but he was also flawed. His nights were filled with parties, drinking, and tabloid headlines. He had a reputation for womanizing and living with little regard for restraint. At times his behavior frustrated teammates and managers, and his health suffered from his indulgences. Yet these imperfections made him relatable. He wasn't a saint. He was human, and that humanity connected him to millions. Fans loved him not just for the home runs, but because he lived as they wished they could, loud, fearless, and unapologetic. Ruth's scandals never overshadowed his contributions. Instead, they painted a fuller picture of a man who embraced life without hesitation. In him, America saw both its virtues and its vices. He was proof that greatness does not demand perfection, only passion. And in Babe Ruth, passion burned brighter than anything else. Legacy that shaped America. Babe Ruth's story is not just about baseball, it is about America itself. From a troubled childhood in Baltimore to becoming the face of the nation's favorite pastime, Ruth embodied the idea that greatness can rise from the most unlikely places. He saved baseball after scandal, brought joy to millions during hard times, and turned stadiums into theaters of wonder with every swing of his bat. His records may have been surpassed, but the legend of the Sultan of Swat has never faded. Ruth taught us that sports are more than numbers. They are about hope, resilience, and the thrill of possibility. Nearly a century later, his name still carries the weight of myth, reminding us that true legends never die. Babe Ruth was more than a player. He was a symbol, a dream, and a legacy that continues to shape the soul of baseball and the heart of America.